Hardly any shares change hands, but yesterday the market did drop its share by nearly 17%, and banks have all severed ties now with Oakbay Investments. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight I'm chatting with Clive Simpkins. He's an independent marketing and communications strategist to find out whether or not you can ever restore a reputation that has been publicly trashed. And Stuart Theobald from Intellidex, he's joining us via Skype in London to find out whether or not Oakbay Investments is sustainable in the current very challenging South African business climate. Stuart Theobald in London, let's go to you first. Just give us a context, please, for Oakbay Investments, the Guptas, whether they're here, whether they are in India or whether they're in Dubai. The latest as you understand it.
Well, I'm not sure where they are, Bruce. We've got, shall we just say, conflicting reports. Chances are they're moving around as they're needed or where they think they're needed. As for Oakbay, it's listed on the JSE, as you said. Extremely thin trade. Only about 2% of the company is held by what looks like in a free float by people who are actively trading the share. So, as you said, you see just a few trades every day of in the region of tens of thousands of rands, so not very much, even though on paper the company has a market cap of about 16 billion rand. So, that puts it in the league of big companies relatively big companies like EOH or Barloworld. But the company itself, the Guptas have been saying that over 7,000 people work there. I tried to have a look to see where those people might be working, and I can't get to that number. Its last annual report said it had 1,000 people working there, and since then it's done an acquisition of another business. But I looked at the numbers for that business, and it doesn't seem that many people could be working there, given the size of the cost base. But anyway, you've got two businesses, largely exploration businesses, a big uranium business and a coal business, which is actively producing for Eskom. And those are the major parts of the business. It's certainly not making any money. Its last 6 months, it lost 32 million rand. It lost money the year before that as well. So it's a business that raises funding and then spends that funding in an effort to try and develop its assets, but as yet has not figured out how to actually make a bottom line profit.
And it's got a couple of challenges. That's the polite South African word for crisis problems, and potentially faces a real crisis of confidence if it can't find itself a sponsor and if it can't find itself a set of auditors. We know that its sponsor has announced that it will drop it by the beginning of June. We know that KPMG started an avalanche of financial services businesses deciding to not do business with the Guptas, and I can't see any one of the other big four, including Grant Thornton, signing them up to be their auditors, and certainly the banks have abandoned them as well. It's almost unprecedented in South African corporate history, if not unprecedented, Stuart Theobald, to have this kind of corporate mass action against a customer.
It's quite remarkable, Bruce, and it's there have been some suggestions that there's some kind of coordinated activity going on here. I think Oakbay itself has kind of vaguely said that maybe there's a third force at work. But looking at it, there is an explanation. It's a free market, and people have every right to not do business with people if they want. There's no rule against turning away a customer. If you look at the facts of the matter, you have a company who has certainly used its political relationships. So, for instance, when it signed the deal to buy the Optimum coal mine, it had the mining minister with it in a meeting with Glencore in Switzerland. The facts of the matter are very concerning, I think, for any company that is engaged with this business. And you just remember that banks are under considerable pressure to not be caught up in any way with anything untoward, and that's a global phenomenon, and banks are probably more sensitive to that kind of risk than they ever have been in history. So with the facts that have come out about the Guptas and their relationship with government, it does seem like the banks have taken fright and decided that they just want nothing to do with it, that it's too big a reputational risk to them, and it might even include operating risk. We don't know what information they have access to that might not yet be public. But they've simultaneously decided that they will not do business with the company. Now, I think what's unprecedented is what does the company do in this situation? It has to have an auditor, otherwise it can't function as a company in South Africa. Somebody's got to sign off its accounts. It has to have an exchange sponsor, otherwise it can't function as a listed company on the JSE. It certainly has to have a bank, otherwise it can't conduct normal transactions as a business. So I think that this has left the company in a very perilous situation.
Stuart Theobald, I'm going to leave it with you there. Thank you very much for joining us from London this evening. He is the chairman of Intellidex. And that's the real problem, is here you have people not wanting to, or companies not wanting to do business with anything Gupta related. These are the same banks and auditors that might have provided services to the likes of Brett Keble, to the guys who fixed the bread price, and others as well, of course. So where is that line drawn? What is the importance of reputation when it comes to doing business? Well, one of the foremost reputation experts in South Africa is Clive Simpkins. It is unprecedented on every level.
It's amazing, Bruce, and of course because the banks, the auditors and so on have chosen to remain silent on the issue, a million conspiracy theories are flourishing.
Yeah, and those million conspiracy theories lead us to believe, certainly I lead me to believe, that somebody knows something, or the banks know and the auditors know something that the rest of us don't. Now that's not particularly fair on the Gupta family, who are yet to be convicted of doing anything wrong. People might not like them, they might not like the way they do business, they might not like the political connections that they have managed to build up over the last 20 years. But they've never been convicted in a court of law, Clive.
No, and surely if your financial institution decides to stop doing business with you, or your JSE sponsor walks away from you, or your auditors dump you, they have to give you some sort of reason. And if it were a reason that held water and was unfair, one would imagine that the Guptas would have said something, or their spin doctors would have. And there's been silence there as well, except for we've been treated unfairly.
It's incredible how quickly things have come unstuck. A month ago they were untouchable. And suddenly they've become everybody's sort of public enemy number one. This was the thorn in Jacob Zuma's side, which Julius Malema spotted and has beaten down on the ANC on this issue. Do you see this as interconnected in terms of, has Julius Malema got lucky, or did he strategically choose the weak point?
I think that, well, not think, it has to be that Malema has inside ANC information all of the time. So he, over the years, acquired a reputation, as it has Zuma, for getting and collecting dirt on people and being ready to dish it, and obliquely threatening to dish it at the most inappropriate time. So when Malema says something, including, for example, the vast sums of money that were allegedly taken to Dubai by our president,
whether it is true or not,
yeah,
it sticks.
It sticks.
And there is a level of plausibility in the minds of some that make rumour become fact. We've got a crisis on our hands beyond reputation. Do we not?
You know, it's done brand damage to the entire country. I was talking to someone this morning and I said, we were embarrassed during apartheid to be associated with South Africa, and now we are being re-embarrassed, and we're embarrassed to be associated with South Africa again because of all of this. And because it's so wild, it actually, in a sense, knocks fiction into a cocked hat. Because if you wrote the stuff in a novel, an editor would probably reject it as being completely implausible and ridiculous. But it isn't, it's happening.
If you look at those 92 hours that transpired between the time that Nhlanhla Nene was fired and Des van Rooyen was appointed and he was fired, or moved aside, and Pravin Gordhan was brought into the finance ministry, that is a Tom Clancy novel all of its own. And yet it is the stuff that defies logic and defies reason. We've allowed it to get this far. Cheryl Carolus, chatting to her the other day, and said this has happened on our watch. And she wasn't, I think, only talking about ANC members and senior ANC members. It's happened on everybody's watch, and we've allowed it to happen.
It was an amazing interview, and the trouble is, as in any crisis, the moment there is a lack of information, the rumour mill kicks into operation, and the poorer the communication, the faster the rumour mill works. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Plus, we have to concede, as South Africans, we have a flair for drama. So the Guptas Guptas fly from Lanzaria to Dubai.
As they have many times, no doubt,
Before,
in the last 20
but
years.
suddenly they fled the country. So we have a gift for really blowing these things out of all proportion. We might be quite shocked when after a few weeks and some of the momentum has died down that they come back and Saxonwold is recolonized.
And the blue lights continue to go in and out the gates at Saxonwold. Is there a way out for the Guptas, for the president, from a reputation perspective? Not talking about the Constitutional Court, not talking about the legalities, not talking about the spy tapes, from a reputation perspective, because ultimately reputation is everything. Is there a way out?
Look, as Malcolm Gladwell so very cogently wrote, there's a tipping point to everything. And in reputation terms, you can get to a point where the situation is potentially still retrievable. I think this thing has gone way over the fulcrum, and it actually has a critical mass on the negative side that would make it functionally impossible to pull it back, because it would take years and years of really good things and amazing good behavior for the Guptas to be rehabilitated in image terms.
Now, one looks at the president, one looks at Richard Nixon. People say Nixon, and you played a word association game. They don't go nice guy, good granddad, bit of a whiskey problem. They go Watergate.
Yes.
It sticks 40 years later.
Well, it's sticking to Clinton during Hillary's bid for the presidency.
Well, sticking to Hillary, unfairly.
Yeah, so they're muckraking on Bill all over. And these things do have that effect. We've got motivational speakers on the circuit in South Africa who are former criminals. I won't mention names, but you will know they were financial whiz kids of whom I'm speaking. So we tend to be very forgiving and we have short-term memories.
But you've got to come clean at some point.
Yes.
And that's the first. There's a catharsis that needs to happen.
And the point is, I think what we have to see here is we need to see some genuine kind of contrition, and then we also have to see...
The president said he was sorry. He went on TV and said he was sorry. Come on, Clive, be generous.
We have to see also what reparations would come out of it. What would they do? And it would have to be something truly, truly amazing, along the lines of a Gupta trust being set up to facilitate the education of thousands of kids in the rural areas or something. This would take, I think, way more than the capacity of Bell Pottinger in London, whom they've appointed to handle it. I can't see how they could possibly fix it.
Yeah, and that's the trouble. So the reputations are trashed. They might as well go and seek greener pastures if the desert is green.
Yes, because when you approach people like Bell Pottinger who have propped up warlords around the world, that immediately says you are not a nice person. And like Max Clifford, who himself now sits in jail, the reputation fixer himself, the minute there's association with those names, that tells you there's something pretty dire.
So
has
Bell
gone
Pottinger
down.
have a reputation themselves for looking after those less salubrious characters in our current atmosphere. There we go, Clive Simpkins, always a font of knowledge and wisdom is Clive Simpkins. Stuart Theobald too, he is with Intellidex, he joined us on the line from London, and Clive Simpkins, the independent marketing and communications strategist. There'll be more unravelling of the story as the days, weeks and months go by, because trust me, water, bridge, a lot of it's still to flow. Till next time, bye-bye.